do a minute's chant. Is it okay? Do a 1 minute chant?
Yeah.
Jananam sukadham maranam karunam milanam maduram smaranam karunam kalavashadiha sakalam karunam samayadipate akilam karunam. Namaskaram. Good morning, everyone.
Sadhguru, a very warm welcome to you, and we are told that this is your first physical interaction of this kind after
Yes.
a painful 12 months of this pandemic, so it's a great honor for us to have you here on India Today. There are very many issues that we'd like to speak to you about, and I'm going to admit right at the start that given the limited time we have, I had to do an elimination process of the things that I really wanted to ask and the things I possibly couldn't ask because of time. But I'd like to start, Sadhguru, by asking you about the journey you made during the pandemic in the United States amidst this historic challenge that faces the world. You were out there, you were on the road, meeting people, meeting communities. Tell us what that was like, because this was at a time when the world was in lockdown. What made you go out there under all these conditions and get out onto your motorcycle and out onto the road?
See, it's almost 20 years ago when I had a certain encounter with a Native American being or a person in a certain way. What I saw there, what was happening with that life, probably is one of the most painful moments of my life, the way it was, that person's life. So, since then I've been trying to find out more about them and do all that. As a part of this, I decided to set up the Isha Institute of Inner Sciences in Tennessee at the head of what is called as the Trail of Tears. There's a very a tragic event that happened when the Cherokee tribes were moved from Tennessee to Oklahoma, where thousands of people died in the cold, men, women and children, because they were made to walk in winter without footwear, without anything. They were just rounded up suddenly and made to do this. So I set up the institution at the head of Trail of Tears, and we've been doing a lot of work to mitigate this situation. But it is later that I realized that there were, or there still are, over 500 Native American nations within United States. Most people are not aware of this. And these 500 nations have 500 different languages, their own spiritual processes, their own practices and variety of things. A lot of it has diminished or in decay because till 1974 or '6, somewhere around there, it was illegal to practice any of those religious practices. It's only in 1974 it became legal for them to practice. So they're trying to recover from that. I've been thinking of going to many of these reservations, which I've visited a few. But it's the pandemic which gave me the chance, because otherwise my schedule never allows me to deviate from what I'm doing. From the moment I land in United States, the day I land, if I land in the morning, evening there'll be a public event. The day I'm leaving, there'll be a public event, I finish and go straight to the airport. This is how it is. So for the first time, I landed in United States and there was no schedule. So I thought this is the best time to do it. So I decided to go on the motorcycle, because the Native American culture is not… there's no written language. Only the Cherokees came up with a written language later, otherwise it's all spoken. So they always say, whatever they have to express is blowing in the wind. So I thought if it's blowing in the wind, it's best I'm on the motorcycle. And I did 15,000 kilometers in 36 days and shot a lot of material. Probably over 100 hours of videos we've shot, which is yet to be curated. So it became an immense experience, and for them, above all, what I decided was, these cultures have become invisible. Most people don't know they exist. So I thought I should give them some visibility, and in a small way, I think we've managed. I think we got something like over 60 million views on the videos that have been published, but most of the material is yet to be published, which we will do now slowly. So that was an immensely enriching experience to meet these people, to know what they've gone through and what they're going through right now. But at the same time, the pandemic, these reservations the infection rates when I went was 3 times higher than the general American society. So we had to conduct this very carefully. We had camper trucks with us. So for the entire 36 days, a crew of 18 people, we cooked for ourselves. We made this into 3 groups, that in case somebody gets infected, we'll eliminate one group and the rest will go ahead. So we had 3 layers of protection. All the cooking was done by us, and we traveled, we slept in the campers for 36 days. We were on the road, never checked into a hotel, never ate in a restaurant. It's just little care.
We've just seen the spectacular, celebrations that happened in Coimbatore also on Mahashivratri, the all-night meditation. It looked like the pandemic didn't really dampen the arrangements. It was still… it still looked like something that… you were able to conquer the pandemic for this celebration.
No. From 860,000 people of last year to 20,000 people this year is a big dampener.
But it didn't look like it, that's what I meant. Because you still had participation from all over the world, people were joining in live. I hear those numbers were very phenomenal.
I'm just getting the numbers today. 20.2 million people watched it online, and over 100 million people watched on the television channels. Over 123 channels live telecast this. So, it's a massive… we need to understand this. The longing within the human being to know something beyond earning a living and going about the daily chores is enormous, especially among the youth. The problem is, there has not been a logically correct, verifiable kind of process. Everybody is trying to run things with advice from heaven. The youth don't want to go to heaven, they want to live here. Those days are gone. Nobody wants to go to heaven, they want to live here in a sensible and fruitful way. So for that, there is nothing better than yoga, because yoga approaches human well-being as a technology, as a scientific process, not as a philosophy, not as an ideology, not as a belief system. So that is being slowly realized. I must tell you this. In 2020, across all platforms, our viewership, video viewership has been 1.83 billion people, That interest is deep longing in human beings, especially when mortality becomes very obvious and in the face. The longing to know what's beyond becomes enormous. So this has to be catered to if you want to create a sane, sensible and balanced society.
Has that sense of mortality you're talking about been amplified in the last 12 months? You seeing a greater awakening, and I mean specifically, Sadhguru, among the youth? Do they see a clear path now?
See, a whole lot of people There are too many immortal people. You drive on the streets of Chennai, not only Chennai, anywhere, because you are here, I'm saying you drive. There are people who are crossing the road like they're immortal. They think a truck or a bus or a car cannot kill them. They think they're immortal, for whatever reasons. Though 180,000 people die on Indian roads, every 12 minutes somebody loses a limb, every 4 minutes there's a fracture. But lot of people think they're immortal. You come to your senses, real senses, only when you are conscious that you are mortal. If you understand, mortality means just this, you understand you are on a limited leash of time. When you know you have a limited amount of time, there is no time to do stupid things. There is no time to do anything that doesn't matter to you. You will do only what really matters to you. If you and me and everybody starts doing only that which truly matters to us, you will live in a fantastic world. Too many people are doing things that they don't care for.
I wanted to ask you specifically about people who don't care what they're doing and the challenges that have been thrown up during this coronavirus pandemic, Sadhguru. There is this huge divide now between vaccination, don't vaccinate yourself, there is there is rhetoric, there are rumors, of course a large measure of politics also over it. What do you make of that? Because it's a massive challenge for a country of this kind.
See, Shiv, you and me are sitting here alive right now only because as children both of us were vaccinated for many things. Otherwise, in 1947, the average life expectancy of an Indian was 28 years. Both of us have no right to be here by those standards. So we've just forgotten the benefit of modern science. So many of us here are alive. We could have just died of a flu if there was no modern medicine. Yes or no? Simple things. You don't have to get some cancer to die. If you sneeze, you may die. It's possible. Now this virus is showing that to you, if you sneeze, you may die. Right now, if you want this whole hall to get excited, you don't have to drop a bomb. If somebody sneezes loudly, everybody will boof. They realize they're mortal, you know. Yeah. So right now you're approaching mortality with a certain fear and paranoia because you suddenly thought about it. If you're always conscious, you would naturally be spiritual, because what mortality makes you realize is that your body is not permanent. When you see that, you want to know what other dimensions exist. Right now, dimension is a bad word, I hope you know that.
Okay. We'll come to that.
So what other dimensions of life exists will come to your focus and interest only when you realize your physicality is not be-all of everything.
I want to come to another program, campaign that has taken up some of your time and energy recently, Sadhguru, that has also caught a lot of attention. Since we're in Tamil Nadu and, I'm sure everyone in this room has also seen it, it's your campaign to save the temples of Tamil Nadu. They run into the many thousands. You've compared what's happened with the East India Company. You say that there is no reason why these temples shouldn't be taken care of by devotees and that you need to remove them from the, as you say, the stranglehold of, government control. Can you tell us about how this campaign actually started, where it stemmed from, and what do you hope to achieve by it?
See, I am not a daily temple-going kind of person. I may not visit a temple in a year or 2 years. If at all, if I go, something draws me because if I find the temple is powerful or it's beautiful because of its architecture, and I'm a little bit of an engineering freak, if I find there is some engineering magic out there, it draws me. Otherwise, if it's energetically charged, I want to go there. I am not a praying person, first of all. I have never prayed in my life till today. This may be very shocking for a lot of people. I have never uttered a prayer. Well, there are invocations, practices, because yoga sees life as a way of enabling yourself, not as a way of calling out for help. Calling out for help doesn't exist in the yogic culture. We are only seeing how to enable ourselves, equip ourselves to live this life to the fullest possible way. So, but because I've traveled extensively, at one time I crisscrossed India on my motorcycle. Later on I've driven all over India. So naturally, especially if you travel in Tamil Nadu, temple is not just another place. Temple is the heart of the town. It is because of the temple, town exists. It's not because people lived there, a temple came. No, because a temple came up, then the town happened. And they are magnificent in the way it's been done. People, I don't know how many people understand this, nowhere else in the world has granite stone been carved as it's been carved in Tamil Nadu. I've traveled everywhere in the world, every continent, I've seen every monument that is there. Nobody has carved granite stone the way we have carved it here. For example, you come from Karnataka. In Karnataka, there are exquisite temples, but all done with soapstone. Soapstone is like wood, you can just carve it like this. With a chisel, you can just do it with your hand. You don't need a hammer to do that. But carving granite to intricate design is not a joke. We have done enormous amount of work with granite now in the yoga center. We know what it takes. Today with all the trucks, cranes, machines, every kind of machine we have. When men did this just out of sheer hands, sheer human effort, I bow down to those men 1,000, 2,000 years ago. What kind of people are these? And they didn't do this for livelihood. What is it that's burning in their hearts? So this culture is a land of devotion. Because we saw, when you have devotion in your heart, you are at your best. Physically, mentally, emotionally, and in terms of your energy, you're at your best. You will do things what human beings think is impossible to do. So we did not look at human well-being as just economics. We did not think that if you just have a nice house and you have a job and you have money, you will be fine. Well, Western societies are proving that you will not be fine if you have all those things. But here, we were well. For us, our economic well-being was a consequence of our spiritual richness. But now what has happened? Well, I can tell you 1,000 because right now we are documenting a little over 1,000 temples as an example. Our volunteers are going and taking videos and documenting what's happening. If you see it, it's heart-rending. Tremendous works of art and architecture just being vandalized, destroyed, cannibalized, used to build other buildings. As UNESCO says, Tamil Nadu temples are in a state of decay, a serious decay. And the numbers, I've already put it out, but if I have to say it, all this came to fore for me. It's been in my mind, our volunteers have been attending to a few important temples, every Sunday mornings going and cleaning the temples, all this kind of stuff has been done. This is all nominal stuff, this is not going to really change. Some small change it'll make. But in the month of July in 2020, Tamil Nadu government submits to the High Court, Chennai, Madras High Court. You're not supposed to call it Chennai High Court, it's a Madras High Court.
Yes.
We spend a lot of time on these kind of things. In the Madras High Court, they presented this, saying that 11,999 temples, not even a single puja is happening because they don't have revenue. And over 34,000 temples have less than 10,000 rupee income per year. And in 37,000 temples, there's only one person who does puja, caretaking, security, cleaning and the works, one guy. So you can imagine what state all these places are. But at the same time, we have over 500,000 acres of land under the temples. We have 2.33 crore square feet of buildings. But the revenue that we get is 128 crores per year. In that, 14% goes for auditing and management. 1 to 2% goes for puja and festivals, rest whatever, okay? Just to give you a contrast of this, the gurudwaras, the SG… what do you call it, SGPC, is it? SGPC manages 85 gurudwaras. Their budget is over 1,000 crores per year. See what a great job they're doing in serving their community. 87% of Tamil Nadu's population is a Hindu community, but out of 44,000 temples, you get 128 crore rupee income. So what to say about this management? Is there anything more to be said? They have submitted in the High Court, nothing more to say. That's enough. Nobody has to make any other research, and UNESCO is saying it's in a state of decay. Decay is the word. So, if you leave it like this, temples were not places of worship in India. Temples were not just places of prayer. There was worship, but not a place of prayer. It is a powerhouse. For different aspects of life, they created different types of energy. There's a whole science about it. If you want me to put it in context, you know, there are 5-element temples. For different elements, for water, earth, air, space and fire, there are different 5 temples. This is supposed to serve the whole region. These 5 temples should, you know, operate in tandem, doing various processes to create a certain sense of well-being in the human beings who live in that region. So I happened to be in one of them a few years ago. I asked them, are you doing something together? They said, no, we are all separate management. Then I said, your situation is like this. Your father was a rich man, he had a Rolls Royce, and he died. 5 sons, each one of you took one wheel, and you're rolling it and you think you have a Rolls Royce. What is the problem with you? Because the beauty of these temples is, these are sadhana temples. That means you don't go there and worship and pray and ask for this and that. This is a place where you're supposed to go and work. The water in your body, the earth in your body, the fire and air and space in your body, you're supposed to work with it, because the most fundamental aspect of yoga is called Bhuta Shuddhi. That means to cleanse the elements within you. Your health, your well-being, your intelligence, your access in the world, everything is determined by this. The entire yogic process, the foundations are Bhuta Shuddhi. All practices are only towards this. So they built powerhouses to do this kind of work. But today, you're running it like some kind of a business, because you say temple, people say revenue, people say property. It's very symbolic, because when East India Company took over the temples, they put all the temples under the revenue department, very appropriate. So it has to change. Above all, it's your fundamental right that why is it a community is denied to have their own places of worship. They say, no, they will mismanage. You're telling me among the 87% of Tamil Nadu's population, you can't find 25 people and form a board who are responsible enough and competent enough to manage this? Is that what you're saying?
Is there a specific model though, Sadhguru? Yes, it is one thing to say that, you know, let the community manage the temples, but is there a specific model that needs to be implemented that can be replicated for all of these temples that you are offering?
So, if you want to look at models, there are many ways to look at it. Till now, people have not thought like this, because when the East India Company took over, what condition temples were in? They were vibrant places. That's why so many have been built. Every one of them was full of activity. And they were full of wealth, gold, diamonds, everything. So they swept it clean. I'm not interested in the gold diamond business. The important thing is, this is the spiritual soul of Tamil people. This has to come alive. So how do you manage it? So they will say, one basic argument in Tamil Nadu is, oh, again the Brahmin community will take over, they will discriminate against everybody. See, these things have happened only in the last 200 years. Before that, Brahmin community was not owning and managing the temple. They were only taking care of the puja part of it. Why was it done that way? You must understand, everything else also was done that way, that was our reality of the time. You want to open a goldsmith shop, you had to be an achari to do that. You want to be a carpenter, you have to be another kind of achari. You want to be in the army, you have to be a kshatriya. Otherwise, you know the whole story of Karna and the whole ruckus about that. What is it? He is not a kshatriya, so you can't be in the army. But today, if you join your NDA, no matter what caste or creed or religion you are, can you join the Indian army? Why can't we do the same? First thing is competence, another thing is you must have devotion in the heart. See, right now if you want to join Indian army, First thing is you must have a devotion for the country, that you're willing to lay down your life if it comes to that. Next thing is competence. Competence can be given by training. What you need is fundamentally devotion. So are there no people with devotion? All you have to do is run a school. Run a school. 2 years, 4 years training is needed, run for different types of temples, there are different processes. We can train, we will not ask you what your caste and creed is. I'm not saying handover means tomorrow morning hand it over. Start the process. First thing is express the intent. I'm raising this before the election. But I did not raise just that one thing, I raised 5 points. I said, Kaveri should run for 12 months. Right now, 5 months in a year it's dry, fully dry. They're going on talking about delta farmers. Where is a delta when the river is not flowing? What… we're just talking rubbish, I'm saying. Where is the delta when the river is not flowing? It's dry for 5 months, 175 kilometers inland it dries up. A river which has run for millennia, many millennia, today in the last 50 years it's drying up, and now last year 175 kilometers, every year it is going back by 1-2 kilometers where it dries up. I've been joking with people who are fighting, but Karnataka people are not letting out the water. I said, see, you fight for some more time. In another 30-40 years' time, there'll be no Kaveri, so no fight. No fight. At least, nothing to fight about. See, to fight also you need some wealth and something, right? If you have nothing, what will you fight about? Already delta farmers, from 4 crops in a year, they've come to 1. That 1 will go if you go on like this. So instead of fighting between the both of you, because river does not know whether you speak Kannada or Tamil. River has been flowing forever, you divided your states the way you want, it's fine, for whatever administrative convenience you've done it. But please understand, these 2 states have to get together, set up a commission, how to make the river flow for 12 months of the year. That's what you need to look at, not how much I drink and you drink. But this is politically popular to talk. Okay, we will… Karnataka, suddenly election time comes, some hotshot will say, we will just keep the Kaveri totally here. Tamil people, they won't get a drop of water, so that guy gets elected there. Here somebody says, we'll burst the dams and have river come to us, we will drink up everything. That guy will win the election. This bluster has to stop. Election time means it has become meaningless rhetoric and simply bluster. We want to see some reason and commitment to what you want to do. So essentially I came out with 5 points about Kaveri, about education, about skill development and about investments coming into Tamil Nadu and the temple issue. And I said, please, this is like I'm trying to develop a citizen's manifesto. Why are political parties telling us what they will do? Please ask us what we want. Responsible citizens in the state stand up and say, this is what we want. When we say this is what we want, you tell us whether you can do it or not. Why are you telling us what you will do to us? You're not kings, you're democratically elected leaders. Pre-election, every citizen, responsible citizen should stand up and say, this is what we want in our state. Then they can say whether they can do it or not do it. So I am saying when it comes to the temples, I have an elaborate process, but don't talk about the process now. First express the intent. Yes, we are willing to look at it. We want to hand it over to the community. When it'll happen, it may take 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, I'm okay. But let the process start. First thing is at least to appoint a commission so that you start examining how to hand over, what is the process. Well, if you want models, the models that I say may be shocking for a lot of people, but I am look for… because I am committed to success. If you do something, it must be successful. I'm saying, why don't you look at BCCI as a model? Why don't you look at CII as a model? Why don't you look at Gurudwara thing only as a model? These are all models, you can develop a hybrid of your own for the complexity of what exists here. But irrespective of caste and creed, a temple should be open to everybody, not only open as a devotee, even to manage and also do the spiritual part of it, also it must be open to everybody if they have devotion in their heart and willing to train themselves for what they need to do there. This is all that matters, this is the future. You can't be still talking the old problem, oh, Brahmins will take over, Brahmins will dominate. Why will they dominate if you set up a right kind of procedure? And if they also happen to be there, what's your problem? You are here, what is my problem? See, did anybody ask? When something is successful, you must understand these things get demolished. Did anybody ask what is Tendulkar's caste? Nobody cares how many centuries is all they're counting, right? This is what should happen to every aspect of our life. What is the success? What is your track record? Then who cares what is your caste?
Sadhguru, since you brought up politics, I'd like to pick just a little bit on something that you said. This is a state that has seen very strong personalities in politics, cult figures. The politics of personality in many ways has been quite endemic to Tamil Nadu, other parts of the country as well, but definitely here in Tamil Nadu. We are in that post-personality kind of phase right now. Are you saying, Sadhguru, that when you say it's not about who we want but what we want, are you saying that Tamil Nadu is ready for that post-personality kind of phase in politics? You don't have a Jayalalitha, there's no MGR, there's no Karunanidhi. Is that what the state is ready for now?
No, I think it's not a question of we are ready or not. We are already in it for more than 3 years now, and we're doing fine. So,
one of the things in the election campaign that we've seen, especially here in Tamil Nadu, there was one flashpoint on the north-south divide. There was a statement that was made by a politician about how things are… people are more receptive in the south than they are in the north. Oh. His experience in the south is superior to what he experienced in the north. What did you make of that? Because much was made of that comparison between the south and the north.
You're asking the wrong person, I'm a South Indian, so when somebody from the north said it, it's a controversial thing. When we say it, it's pride. No, I'm not saying that. So, see, if somebody is aspiring, this we have to change, it's not a change, that's not our reality. But I'm saying, we are a fast-changing society, very, very rapidly changing society, because change used to happen at a certain level when communication levels in the world were at a certain level. Today, what happens in Los Angeles? If it happens in the morning, by afternoon, all the people are doing… youth are doing the same thing here, okay? It's like that. So when this is the thing, don't expect change to happen over 10 years. It's no more an evolution, it's like flip. Today they will flip. You look at the youth, 60% of the population is supposed to be below 30 years of age. You look at the youth, those who have access and means for communication, which is very large right now and increasing by the day. They don't care whether you're North Indian, South Indian, which country you are, what you are. The only thing that matters to them is, they have some aspirations. Who will fulfill those aspirations? And they don't want you to be a star, they're aspiring to be stars. So, the era of somebody being charismatic in some other field and suddenly jumping into this, I think that era is over. They want you to shine as a leader, that they would appreciate. But you are shining somewhere, so we will replace you here. I think that era is largely over. It is really over, I would say, because I've been interacting with thousands of youth. That era is over, though nobody is looking for a star to come and take over the state or the country. No. They would like somebody to rise among them and become a star, that they will accept, but not the other way around. About North India, South India, see, it is not about North India and South India. North Tamil Nadu and South Tamil Nadu, there are lots of issues and opinions, okay? West Tamil Nadu and East Tamil Nadu, lots of opinions. Coimbatore district and Nilgiri district, you don't know how superior we are in Coimbatore district. We are the most superior people in the Tamil Nadu state because we come from Coimbatore. So, people have pride about their origins, it's fine, but it need not be in comparison with somebody. You don't have to degrade somebody for you to feel better. It's a
As far as the spiritual politics is concerned, Sadhguru, there is, not just in Tamil Nadu but elsewhere as well, we're seeing a lot of symbolism, the temple hopping that happens. You've just mentioned that, we're seeing it in Bengal. We've seen it in some of the yatras here in
The
Tamil
big
Nadu as
competition, everybody is rushing into temple after temple.
Yeah, I really want to know what you think of that because you've just said, and we have one of the youngest electorates that will be going to vote in this current cycle of elections. If they are not that interested in or keen in spiritual politics, how does all of this fit in with that? And how do you see the temple hopping element in political campaigns?
See, whether they go to a temple or a mosque or to a iftar party or to a church or to Christmas parties, all these things have been there, all right? But generally, it is the majority community who was left behind. Now they're catching up. Going to temple also has become an in thing. Otherwise, going to Christmas parties and going to iftar parties were in thing because in Christmas party there was wine, in iftar party there was biryani, in temple only water. So it was not a cool thing. But now that water has become sacred, in the last probably 5-6 years this evolution has happened, now everybody wants to be seen in a temple. This got nothing… even the iftar has nothing to do with Islam. Or Christmas party has nothing to do with Christianity. Temple going by politicians like this has nothing to do with Hindu way of life. They are doing every trick possible to get maximum number of votes. So don't call it spiritual politics, it's just politics. But instead of saying what I will do, you're trying to show who I am. My intention is that is what we need to change. Who you are, I don't care. What will you do? Is the only question. I think every citizen in this country should raise this question. Okay, I will give you my vote. What will you do in the next 5 years? I don't care whether you are a man, woman, Hindu, Christian, what the hell you are, I don't care. What will you do? What are you capable of doing? That's all that matters. We have to shift. The media has a big responsibility in this direction, not who, what is the big question. Every citizen should raise this, media houses should raise this, everybody who's concerned about this nation should raise this. What will you do? Who you are, I don't care. Right now, by going to the temple, they're trying to show who they are. They're not saying what we will do.
But is that a reflection, Sadhguru, in what people are looking for? Because ultimately projecting powerful personalities still appears to work with the electorate. Of course, they still fight about, let's not talk about who we are, but what we are promising the people. But our politics is still full of personality.
See, I would say, not a total shift, but there is some shift in the last 5 years. What will you do is slowly gaining momentum. Not enough to decide the election, not yet. But still who you are in terms of your caste and your creed is important, and certain people are trying to play only that up all the time. But I feel in the last 5 years, in the electorate, there is a movement where people are thinking, okay, what can this guy do? It is not that electorate is not big enough to determine the result of the election yet, but we must get there as quickly as possible if you are interested in the well-being of this nation. Otherwise, you are running feudalism in the name of democracy. Because if you are my caste, I will vote. If you are my religion, I will vote. Because I saw you in the temple, I will vote. Or because I saw you in the mosque, I'll vote. This means what? Feudalism in the name of democracy. I have been pushing this. See, one aspect of this is almost 12 years ago, first time I spoke. Recently, I'm glad that Prime Minister has taken it up, because at that level when it's taken, it could become real. I said there must be only one election every 5 years, but lot of politicians who lose the election may go totally out in the cold. 5 years means they may be finished. So I said, okay, national parliamentary election, 2.5 years later, assembly elections, one shot. Twice you get an opportunity in some way to find your political grip. Maybe you may lose the election for wrong reasons sometimes, many things are there. But when a politician is in an election mode, you can't expect much reason. You can only expect rhetoric, because that's the nature of that. That is the nature of that everywhere in the world, not just here. So, if throughout the year there are elections, you keep them always in that mode. All the time people are campaigning endlessly, and because of 24/7 media, it is looking like if just, two states are going into election, it is look like the entire country is in election mode. People are watching this and they get influenced by that. I feel, let's say parliamentary election, if you take this, we must fix a time limit also, because I am seeing this in United States. Nearly 2 years ahead of time, election campaign is started. We must fix 90 days. If you want more, 120 days. Before that, nobody can… Election Commission should become more powerful to take these steps. Nobody can talk about election. Last 3 months or maximum 4 months, you talk whatever you want, because we don't expect much reason from you, simply because your profession, your existence is threatened by the election, I understand that. So you will talk many things. I don't expect you to say all the right things in an election rally because nobody may understand. It's an emotional pitch. But you do it at that time. Don't do it entire 5 years the same talk. But you're doing the five years the same talk because always there is some election going on. This we need to change. And about moving the electorate into a more responsible position is also important, not just going on saying politicians are not okay. Politicians, we did not import them from another planet. They were among us, they stood up to do this job. So we must respect that. What you think is a dirty job, somebody has stood up to do it. So you must support… Once they get elected, 5 years you must support them. If I say this, a whole lot of people will attack me. Oh, he wants to support the government, he's compromised. Arey, when people have elected, I bow down to democratic process. So if you get elected tomorrow, day after tomorrow I'm attacking you, what is the point of this? This means I don't respect people's will. My opinion is not higher than the people's will. I will say whatever I have to say before the election. Once people have, put their mandate, I just bow down, whoever it is, whatever party, I will work with them. Because this is democratic process. The most important aspect of democratic process is… Because the problem is our youth are growing up without any sense of history in them. Never before in the history of humanity, power shifts without bloodletting. Blood will flow everywhere. If power has to shift even from father to son, when they were kings, when they were monarchs, father to son shift means slaughter will happen always. For the first time in the last 50 to 100 years, we have a democratic process. Without a drop of blood, we can shift power, which is not a small thing in human societies. Not a small thing. I'm saying anywhere, even in the animal kingdoms, I'm saying if an old elephant has to give way to the young, it only happens with slaughter, all right? Power shift is always like this. The wonder of democracy is this, that you can shift power voluntarily with the will of the people. Do not destroy that. Once you elect somebody, support them for 5 years. If they don't do well, fire them. But 5 years you have to bear for the wrong decisions you make.
But Sadhguru, how does that fit in with, the opposition? The thing that you said previously about the fact that we are constantly in election mode means there is a vitiated, hostile political atmosphere near constantly in this country. Are you saying that the opposition needs to be more constructive when you say that we need to accept that so-and-so has been elected and is in power, and that what the opposition does is generally destructive?
This is the fundamental constitution. When they get elected, they get the right to make the laws. This is the nature of democratic process, this is our constitution. Why should I state that? This is the reality of our existence. First of all, you make up your mind whether you want democracy or not. So those who cannot win election, you try to make laws on the street. So where will that lead? See, is it very difficult for me to gather 10,000 people and I can easily do it. I can bring Chennai to stand still tomorrow. If I just give a call today, tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock, I'll have 10, 15, 20,000 people on all the streets blocking all the traffic, making everybody's life miserable. Unfortunately, we think this is politics. This is not politics, this is anarchy. If once you encourage that, it clearly shows you're not interested in the development and well-being of the people. It's a clear statement. That needs to be dealt as it should be dealt with according to the laws of the Constitution. If we don't have courage to deal with that, we must give up our aspirations for being a successful nation. It's very important to understand this. There are many African nations, anybody can come out with a gun and shoot whoever they want. You want to get there? You think people who are throwing stone at you when you're going on the street and you have nothing to do with anything, they can throw stones at you, they can burn your car, they can… When I see those two-wheelers being burnt on all the televisions, do you know what it takes for that guy to buy that one little motorcycle? It's his life's dream and it's life savings. Just burn the damn thing on the street. What is that guy supposed to do? Who's going to replace it for him? So if you can do this to anybody and there is no consequence for that, well, you are not interested in the well-being of the nation. You don't want to build this nation to any significance in the world. You just want to do your own local things. This is just like right from ancient times in the village, whoever has got 10 muscle men, he will beat up the others, either because of caste, creed or some kind of dominance. You're trying to get back there. So one thing I'm asking for, which the most unpopular thing, nobody likes me for this, is first thing is we must ban political party membership. There should be no membership. See, right now, I am one party, you are another party. So we've already decided who will vote. For these kind of fools who have already decided, why do you need secret ballot? When you have painted it on your forehead who you're going to vote to, what is the use of secret ballot for you? I'm saying you're defeating the fundamental process of democracy. There should be no political party membership because political party membership over a period of time becomes a religion. It becomes as vitiated as a religion. So, you need 1,000, 2,000, maybe 10,000 party, functionaries, that much membership should be allowed. Nobody should be allowed to make crores of membership campaigns because once you are a member, you have lost your reason. You do not vote according to the value of the person who is standing up there. So these changes must happen. This cannot happen from the government. This has to happen from the responsible citizenry, media and various other institutions which are there. We must stand up and make this change happen. It's not an overnight thing. We must be committed to bring this about in the next few years at least.
Since we're almost out of time, Sadhguru, and I promised that I would ask you this question as well, the issue of dimensions on social media, where…
Have you seen my today's…
I did in fact, where you said the several dimensions of ignorance was your retort to the storm of attacks that you came under on Twitter and on social media. Just explain that for us.
No, I didn't come under any attack. They're,
No, since one is on social media, one saw that there were many people who sort of commented on it, made these collages of your tweets.
Very committed group. They're not against me. They're against something else. So they think doing this will help them.
But tell us about… explain the process of that. You tweeted, then then there were all these reactions, and then you felt the need to reply to them this morning.
It's not I feel a need. It's just that I have a little funny bone in my head that once in a way I like to do something quirky because they're getting so bloody serious about nothing. They're just getting serious about nothing. They do not know how to carry their life lightly. This is their problem. And right now, if you have noticed this, ultra-left and ultra-right, both are attacking me heavily, okay? Ultra-Hindus and ultra-left, whoever else is there with them, they are attacking me from all sides. That means definitely I'm doing something right.
I hope the funny bone never goes, especially in an atmosphere of this kind. It's been an absolute pleasure interacting with you, and thank you for taking all of my questions, Sadhguru. A very big hand for Sadhguru. Thank you.